You are not supposed to be here." The words cut through the silence of the grand hall like a blade, sharp and cold and final. Nora froze, her fingers tightening around the silver tray she carried until her knuckles turned white. She did not look up. She never looked up. That was the first rule they taught you when you were brought to the royal house as a child with no family and no wolf. Keep your eyes down. Keep your mouth shut. Be invisible. Survive. I said, "You are not supposed to be here." The voice belonged to Lady Celestine Moreau, daughter of the High Council's most powerful family, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her cruelty. Nora could feel the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward her now, courtiers and nobles who had been milling about the throne room waiting for the king's return, suddenly alert to the prospect of entertainment at someone else's expense. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her gaze fixed on the polished marble floor beneath her. Feet, on the reflection of the crystal chandeliers that she had spent 3 hours cleaning that morning. "Forgive me, my lady," Nora whispered, her voice barely audible even in the vast silence that had fallen over the room. "I was instructed to bring refreshments for the king's arrival." Instructed by whom? Celestine's heels clicked against the marble as she approached, each step deliberate and menacing. Surely no one with any sense would send a wolfless slave into the throne room during such an important occasion. Unless, of course, you are lying. Nora's throat tightened. She was not lying. Head Steward Marcus had specifically told her to prepare the ceremonial welcome service, had handed her the list of requirements himself. But Marcus was nowhere to be seen now, and Nora knew with absolute certainty that he would not step forward to defend her. No one ever did. "I am not lying, my lady." She forced the words out, hating how small her voice sounded, how powerless. "Then look at me when you speak." The command cracked like a whip. Nora's entire body went rigid. To look directly at a high-born wolf was an offense that could earn a slave severe punishment. But to refuse a direct order was worse. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her chin and met Celestine's ice-blue eyes. The woman's perfect lips curved into a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "There. That was not so difficult, was it? Now everyone can see exactly what you are. Omega. Wolfless. Worthless." Each word landed like a physical blow, and Nora felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Around them she could hear the whispers starting, the barely concealed laughter. This was her life. This had always been her life. She opened her mouth to apologize again, to beg forgiveness for whatever imagined slight had triggered this public shaming when the massive oak doors at the end of the hall flew open with a force that shook the very foundations of the room. The sound of heavy boots on marble silenced every whisper, every breath. He entered like a storm given human form, and the air itself seemed to shift and crackle with the power that radiated from him in waves. King Dominic Ashford had been gone for 3 years, fighting a war at the northern borders that most believed would claim his life. The rumors that had circulated through the royal house painted a picture of a losing battle, of an army decimated, of a king who would never return. But here he was, alive and whole, though changed in ways that became immediately apparent. His broad shoulders were covered in a black cloak that did nothing to hide the warrior's build beneath, all muscle and controlled violence. Dark hair fell past his collar, longer than it had been when he left, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that captured attention and held it. Golden, burning, ancient. The eyes of an alpha in his absolute prime, an alpha who had seen death and walked through it unchanged. He moved down the center aisle of the throne room with measured, deliberate steps, and the assembled nobles parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. No one spoke. No one dared. Nora watched him approach, transfixed despite herself, despite every instinct screaming at her to lower her gaze and disappear into the background. She had seen the king before, of course, though only from a distance and only in passing. He had been younger then, clean-shaven, almost approachable. There was nothing approachable about the man who stood before them now. This was a predator, a conqueror, a force of nature wrapped in human skin. His gaze swept across the assembled court with an expression of barely concealed disgust, taking in the fine silks and glittering jewels, the powdered faces and false smiles. These people had lived in luxury and comfort while he and his warriors bled and died in frozen trenches. The contempt in his eyes was unmistakable. Then, impossibly, those golden eyes found hers. Nora's breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to tilt sideways, and for a moment she forgot how to think, how to breathe, how to be. He was looking at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle and her pulse race. No one looked at her like that. No one looked at her at all. You. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel sliding over silk, and it carried easily across the sudden, shocked silence of the room. Come here. Nora's mind went blank. Surely he could not mean her. Surely he was addressing someone behind her. Someone important. Someone worthy of a king's attention. But there was no one behind her. She stood alone against the column where she had tried to make herself invisible, and his eyes had not left her face. My king. Celestine's voice cut in smoothly, too smoothly, as she stepped forward with a graceful curtsy that displayed her figure to full advantage. Surely you wish to greet the High Council. First, or perhaps your assembled nobles who have waited so long for your return. This is merely a servant, not worthy of your notice on such an important day. Dominic's head turned slowly toward Celestine, and the look he gave her could have frozen fire. I did not ask for your opinion, Lady Moreau. I gave an order. If the girl does not obey within the next 5 seconds, I will assume that discipline in my house has become so lax during my absence that even the servants feel entitled to ignore their king. The threat in his words was unmistakable, and Nora felt her feet moving before her brain had fully processed the command. The silver tray shook violently in her hands as she walked forward, each step an agony of self-consciousness as hundreds of eyes tracked her movement. What did he want? What had she done wrong? Was this some new form of punishment, to be humiliated by the king himself in front of the entire court? She stopped 3 paces away from him, as protocol demanded, and dropped into the deepest curtsy her trembling legs could manage. Your Majesty, she whispered, her voice cracking on the words. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. She could smell him now, pine and smoke and something wild and untamed that made her wolfless body react in ways she did not understand. Heat spread through her chest, and her hands shook so badly that the crystal glasses on her tray began to clink together. Closer. The single word was not a request. Nora shuffled forward. Another step, then another, until she was near enough to touch him if she dared, which she absolutely did not. This close, she could see the scars that marked his face and neck, pale lines against tan skin, evidence of battles fought and survived. This close, she could feel the raw power that emanated from him like heat from a forge. What is your name? The question surprised her so much that she almost dropped the tray. In 22 years of serving in the royal house, no one had ever asked. Her name. She was simply Girl, or you, or the Omega. She had almost forgotten that she had a name at all. Nora, Your Majesty. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Nora, he repeated, and the way he said it, slow and deliberate, made it sound like something precious, rather than the plain, unremarkable name it was. And how long have you served in this house, Nora? Since I was 7, Your Majesty. 15 years. 15 years. Something dark and angry flashed across his 15 years as a slave in my own house, and I never knew you existed. That ends today. Before she could process what he meant, before anyone could react, He reached out and took the tray from her hands, setting it aside on a nearby table with a carelessness that made several of the nobles gasp. Then he did something that made Nora's heart stop entirely. He removed his cloak and draped it over her shoulders. The heavy fabric settled around her like a physical weight, warm from his body. Heat and carrying his scent so strongly that it made her dizzy. Wolves throughout the room began to murmur in shock, and Nora understood why. For an alpha to give his cloak to someone was a gesture of protection, of claiming, of significance. For a king to give his cloak to a slave was unthinkable. "My king," an elderly voice called out, and Nora recognized Lord Vaughan, head of the High Council, stepping forward with his hands raised in placation. "Surely you are weary from your journey. Perhaps, we should postpone the formal reception until you have had time to rest and recover. This behavior is most unusual and cannot possibly reflect your true intentions." Dominic turned to face the assembled nobles, and when he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable tone of absolute authority. "My behavior reflects exactly what I intend. I have spent 3 years fighting a war that you," he gestured broadly at the courtiers in their fine clothes, "did nothing to support beyond sending thoughts and prayers. I have watched good wolves die because they lacked proper supplies, proper weapons, proper support from the capital. I have seen the rot at the heart of our society, the way we waste resources on meaningless luxury while our borders burn. That changes now. Everything changes now." He paused, letting his words sink in, then continued with even greater intensity. "I returned to find my house run exactly as it was when I left, with the same outdated traditions, the same cruel hierarchies, the same casual brutality toward those deemed lesser. There are wolves in this room who have lived their entire lives as property, as slaves, simply because they were born without the right bloodline or the right circumstances. No more. As of this moment, slavery is abolished in the royal house and throughout all territories under my direct control." The room erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted over each other, some in outrage, others in disbelief. Celestine's face had gone pale with shock and fury. Lord Vaughan looked as though he might collapse. And Nora stood frozen in the center of it all, wrapped in the king's cloak, unable to comprehend what was happening. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Dominic raised one hand, and silence fell instantly, as if he had cut the strings of every voice in the room. "The law is clear," he said, his tone deadly calm. "The king's word is absolute. Any who wish to challenge this decree may do so formally through the proper channels. Until then, you will obey or you will leave my house. Those are your only options." His eyes found Nora's again, and this time there was something almost gentle in his gaze, though the rest of his expression remained hard as stone. "You will come with me. We have much to discuss." "Your Majesty, I do not understand," Nora managed to say, though her voice shook with every word. "What do you want from me?" "Want from you?" He seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "I want nothing from you, Nora. But I smell something on you, something that should not be possible, and yet is unmistakable. My wolf recognizes you. Do you understand what that means?" She did not. She had no wolf of her own to explain the intricacies of pack bonds and mate recognition. She had spent her entire life on the outside of such things, observing from a distance but never participating. But even she could not miss the way her body responded to his proximity, the way her heart raced and her skin tingled, and her breath came short whenever he looked at her. "I do not have a wolf," she whispered. "I have never had a wolf. I am Omega, wolfless. I cannot be what you think I am. Cannot or have not yet." He stepped closer, and Nora had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "There are old stories, Nora, stories that most have forgotten. Stories of wolves so powerful that they sleep for years, sometimes decades, waiting. For the right moment to emerge. Waiting for the right catalyst. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and touched 2 fingers to the side of her neck, just below her ear. The contact sent a shock through her entire system, a jolt of pure electricity that made her gasp. And deep inside her chest, in a place she had always believed was empty and hollow, something stirred. Something opened one eye and looked out at the world for the first time. Impossible. She breathed, but even as she said it, she could feel the truth. There was something there. Something had always been there, buried so deep that she had never sensed it, never known it existed. A presence. A power. A wolf. "Nothing is impossible," Dominic said quietly. And for the first time since entering the room, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and revealing the man beneath the warrior king. I learned that lesson many times over the past 3 years. I learned that the world is far stranger and more wonderful than our limited traditions would have us believe. I learned that strength comes in forms we do not expect, and that sometimes the most powerful wolves are the ones everyone overlooks. His hand moved from her neck to her cheek, cupping her face with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his fierce appearance. I learned that fate has a sense of humor, and that sometimes it sends you exactly what you need in the form you least expect. You are my mate. Nora, my wolf knows your wolf, even if your wolf is only now beginning to wake. And I will be damned if I let outdated laws and prejudices keep us apart. The declaration sent another wave of shocked murmurs through the assembled nobles, but Nora barely heard them. She was too focused on the impossible, wonderful, terrifying thing he had just said. Mate. He thought she was his mate. A king and a slave. An alpha and an omega. It was not just unlikely, it was prohibited by every law and tradition. Their society held sacred. "The council will never accept this," she said, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "The noble families will revolt. You need alliances, political marriages, heirs from strong bloodlines. You need someone like Lady Celestine. Someone worthy of being queen. Not me. Never me." "I need," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that she felt in her bones. "Exactly what fate has given me. The council can accept it, or they can resign. The noble. Families can revolt, or they can adapt. And as for what I need in a queen, I spent 3 years surrounded by noble-born wolves who cared more about their own comfort than the soldiers dying to protect them. I saw their true nature, Nora. I saw how quickly honor and loyalty disappear when tested by real hardship. So forgive me if I do not particularly value their opinions on what makes someone worthy." He released her face but caught her hand instead, his fingers wrapping around hers with firm warmth. "You have survived 15 years in this place with your spirit intact. You have endured treatment that would have broken most wolves, and yet you stand here now with your head high and your eyes clear. That is strength. That is worthiness. That is exactly what I need standing beside me as I rebuild this kingdom into something better than what it was." Nora wanted to believe him. Gods, she wanted to believe him so badly that it physically hurt. But she had learned long ago not to trust. In fairy tales or happy endings. She had learned that hope was dangerous, that it made you vulnerable, that it set you up for greater pain when it was inevitably crushed. "You do not know me," she said quietly. "You know nothing about me except that I have served in your house. How can you be so certain?" "Because my wolf is certain, and I have learned to trust my wolf above all else. Because I can see the strength in you even if you cannot see it yourself yet. And because I have a feeling that once your wolf wakes fully, once you discover who and what you truly are, you are going to be magnificent." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I am not asking you to trust me blindly or accept this immediately. I am simply asking you to give me a chance to prove that I am right. Will you do that much?" Before Nora could answer, Celestine's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "This is madness. Your Majesty, I say this with the utmost respect, but you have clearly been affected by your experiences at the border. No one would blame you for needing time to recover, to remember who you are and what is expected of you. Perhaps the priest could perform a cleansing ritual, or the healers could examine you for curse marks. There must be some explanation for this aberrant behavior beyond simple choice." Dominic's expression went cold again, and when he turned to face Celestine, Nora saw the courtiers nearest to the noble woman take an instinctive step back. "Aberrant behavior," he repeated softly, dangerously. "Is that what you call it, when a king chooses to exercise his own judgment rather than blindly following traditions established by wolves who have been dead for centuries? Tell me, Lady Moreau, what exactly is it about my choice that you find so offensive? Is it that I have chosen someone of low birth, someone without political connections, someone who cannot advance your family's agenda?" Celestine lifted her chin, and to her credit, she did not back down despite the very real threat emanating from the king. "I find it offensive that you would throw away everything our society stands for, everything that keeps us strong and unified, for a passing fancy. The mate bond is powerful, yes, but it is not infallible. Many kings have felt the pull toward inappropriate partners, and have had the wisdom to resist it for the good of their people. You have a duty, Your Majesty. A duty to your bloodline, to your throne, to the future of the kingdom. And that duty requires a queen who can fulfill the role properly. And you believe you could fulfill that role?" Dominic's tone was almost curious now, as if he were genuinely interested in her answer. "I know I could. My family has prepared me for it since birth. I understand pack politics, diplomatic protocols, the intricacies of alliance management. I can give you strong heirs and a stable foundation for your reign. I can be the partner you need, even if I am not the partner your wolf wants in this moment of weakness." The casual dismissal of the mate bond as a moment of weakness made Nora's chest tighten with unexpected anger. She had spent her whole life accepting that she was less than others, that her opinions and feelings did not matter. But hearing someone else dismiss the impossible miracle that had just occurred, hearing them reduce it to nothing more than an inconvenient distraction, ignited something fierce and protective deep inside her. The thing that had stirred in her chest, the presence she had felt when Dominic touched her, suddenly surged forward with shocking intensity. Heat flooded through her body, and for a moment her vision went strange, colors becoming sharper and more vivid, sounds growing clearer and more distinct. She could hear heartbeats now, dozens of them, could smell fear and anger and arousal mixing in the air around her, could feel power humming just beneath her skin, power that had been locked away for so long that its sudden emergence felt like breaking through ice into open water. No. The word came out stronger than she intended, echoing through the throne room with unexpected force. Everyone turned to stare at her, and Nora felt a moment of pure panic at having drawn so much attention to herself. But Dominic's hand tightened around hers, anchoring her, supporting her, and she found the courage to continue. You do not get to decide what is or is not weakness. You do not get to tell the king what he needs or who he should choose. And you certainly do not get to stand there in your expensive silks and your carefully cultivated beauty and pretend that your qualifications make you more worthy than anyone else. I may not have your education, or your bloodline, or your political connections, but I have something you will never have. I have his wolf's recognition. And if there is one thing I have learned in 15 years of watching wolves interact, it is that you cannot fake that. You cannot manipulate it or buy it or earn it through proper preparation. It simply is, or it is not. The silence that followed her outburst was deafening. Nora could not believe she had just spoken to a high-born noble that way, could not believe the words had come out of her mouth. But now that they had been said, she found that she did not want to take them back. For the first time in her life, she had spoken her truth, had stood up for herself, and for something she believed in. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Dominic was looking at her with an expression of such fierce pride and satisfaction that it made her blush. "There," he said softly, but his voice carried to every corner of the room. "There is the queen I knew you could be. Strong, brave, unwilling to be diminished by those who believe birth determines worth." He turned back to Celestine, and his expression was now completely neutral, which was somehow more frightening than his earlier anger. "You have your answer, Lady Moreau. I appreciate your family's service to the crown, and I am certain there are many roles you could fill with distinction. But Queen is not one of them. You may stay for the formal reception if you wish, or you may retire to your quarters if you find the current situation too distressing. Those are your options." Celestine's face had gone white with rage and humiliation, but she was smart enough to know when she had been decisively defeated. She dropped into a stiff curtsy that barely qualified as respectful, and then turned on her heel and stalked from the room, her attendants scrambling to follow her. Several other nobles exchanged worried glances, clearly uncertain whether to stay or leave, whether to show support for their king's unprecedented decision or to align themselves with the traditional powers that opposed it. "Anyone else wish to voice concerns?" Dominic asked, his tone making it clear that this was not actually an invitation for discussion. "No? Excellent. Then let me make a few things perfectly clear to all of you. I did not fight for 3 years, did not watch good wolves die, did not survive battles that should have killed me 10 times over, just to come home and continue playing the same political games that have weakened our kingdom for generations. Things are going to change. How you respond to those changes will determine your place in the new order I intend to establish." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the assembled nobles with deliberate slowness. "First, as I have already stated, slavery in all its forms is abolished in territories under my control. Any wolf currently held in bondage will be freed immediately and given the choice to remain as paid servants or to leave and seek their fortune elsewhere. Second, the practice of arranged marriages for political alliances will no longer be mandatory. Wolves may choose their own mates regardless of rank or station. Third, the council will be restructured to include representatives from all levels of society, not just the noble families. And fourth, any law or tradition that I determine to be unjust or outdated may be revised or eliminated by royal decree." The murmurs that followed this announcement were a mixture of shock, outrage, and, in a few cases, cautious excitement. Lord Vaughan looked as though he had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Several younger nobles were whispering to each other with expressions that suggested they might actually support some of these changes. And, throughout it all, Nora stood beside the king with his cloak around her shoulders and his hand holding hers, trying to process the fact that her entire world had just been turned upside down. "These reforms will not happen overnight," Dominic continued. "Change of this magnitude requires careful planning and implementation. But make no mistake, they will happen. You can choose to be part of building something better, or you can cling to the old ways and find yourselves increasingly irrelevant. Recommend the former, but the choice is yours." He turned to face Nora again, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle, despite the formal setting. "I need to address the council and begin the process of transition. It will take several hours at minimum, possibly well into the night. But I want you to go with Steward Marcus and have him show you to the Queen's wing of the palace. Those will be your quarters from now on. Rest, eat something. Let yourself begin to adjust to what has happened. And if your wolf continues to wake, do not be afraid. I will send healers to monitor you and make sure the emergence goes smoothly." "The Queen's wing?" Nora repeated faintly. "But I am not. I mean, we are not. You have not, actually. I have claimed you as my mate in front of my entire court," Dominic said, and there was a hint of amusement in his golden eyes now. "That makes you my queen in all the ways that matter. The formal ceremony can come later, after you have had time to understand what this means and decide if it is truly what you want. But as far as I am concerned, as far as my wolf is concerned, you are already mine, and I am already yours. The rest is just paperwork." He released her hand only long enough to signal to a nervous-looking man hovering near the throne. Steward Marcus approached with the expression of someone walking toward his own execution, and Nora felt a moment of vindication at seeing the man who had hung her out to dry now, forced to serve her. "Marcus, you will personally attend to Nora's needs and comfort. She is to be given access to anything she requests, and you will assign a staff to serve her. Treat her with the exact same respect you would show to any queen, because that is what she is. Do you understand?" Marcus bobbed his head so rapidly it looked painful. "Yes, Your Majesty. Of course, Your Majesty. Right away, Your Majesty." "Good. And Marcus? If I hear that she has been treated with anything less than absolute deference and care, I will hold you personally responsible. I think we both know what that means." The threat was clear, and Marcus went even paler. "I understand completely, Your Majesty. You have my word." Dominic nodded, then turned back to Nora. For a moment, the king's mask slipped away entirely, and she saw uncertainty in his eyes, a vulnerability that he was allowing only her to witness. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly. "I know I am asking you to trust me when you have no reason to trust anyone, to believe in a future that probably seems impossible from where you are standing. But I meant what I said. You are mine, Nora, my mate, my queen, and I will protect you and honor you and prove to you every single day that you are worthy of all of it." Then, before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead in a gesture so tender that it brought tears to her eyes. The kiss was brief, chaste, nothing more than a soft touch of skin against skin, but it sent warmth, cascading through her entire body, and the wolf inside her, the impossible wolf that should not exist, rumbled with deep satisfaction. When he pulled back, Nora saw that his eyes had changed, the gold becoming even more luminous, more intense. His wolf was right there, just beneath the surface, looking at her with possessive satisfaction. "Go," he said, his voice rougher now. "Before I forget that I have responsibilities and decide to keep you here beside me where I can see you." Nora went. She followed Marcus through corridors she had cleaned 1,000 times but had never truly seen, up staircases she had scrubbed on her hands and knees, past tapestries and paintings she had dusted without ever really looking at them. Everything looked different now, as if the world had shifted into sharper focus. Or perhaps it was just that, for the first time in her life, she was walking these halls as someone who mattered, someone who had value, someone who belonged. The Queen's Wing was located in the Eastern Tower, a section of the palace she had only entered a handful of times, and always in the role of invisible servant. Now Marcus was opening doors for her, bowing as she passed, explaining in a shaking voice which rooms were for what purpose. A bedroom larger than any space she had ever inhabited, with a bed so enormous it could have slept 5 people comfortably. A private sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the royal gardens. A bathing chamber with a tub carved from a single piece of white marble. A dressing room that was currently empty, but would presumably be filled with clothing appropriate for a queen. It was too much. All of it was too much. Nora stood in the center of the bedroom and felt the walls closing in, felt panic rising in her throat like bile. This was not real. This could not be real. Any moment now she would wake up in the tiny servants' dormitory where she had slept for 15 years. And this would all have been a dream. A cruel fantasy her mind had conjured to torture her. "My lady?" Marcus's voice was cautious, worried. "Are you well? Should I send for a healer?" "I need to be alone," Nora managed to say. "Please, just everyone leave. I need to think. Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between obeying her request and his fear of what the king would do if something went wrong while she was unattended. But eventually, he nodded and herded the other servants out of the room, closing the door softly behind them. The moment. She was alone. Nora's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, still wrapped in Dominic's cloak, and pressed her hands against her chest, where that impossible presence continued to stir and shift. Her wolf. She had a wolf. After 22 years of being certain she was broken, incomplete, fundamentally flawed, there was actually a wolf inside her. How was that possible? Why had it never shown itself before? What did it mean? As if in answer to her silent questions, she felt the presence push forward more strongly, and suddenly her senses exploded into hyperfocus. She could smell everything, the residual scent of whoever had cleaned this room last, the faint aroma of lavender sachets tucked into the wardrobes, the stronger smell of Dominic that clung to his cloak and seemed to wrap around her like a physical embrace. She could hear servants talking 3 floors below, could distinguish at least 5 different conversations happening simultaneously, could feel the texture of the carpet beneath her fingers with such clarity that she could identify individual fibers. It was exhilarating and terrifying, and utterly overwhelming. "Please," she whispered to the presence inside her, to the wolf that was apparently hers. "Please, I do not know what to do. I do not know how to be what he thinks I am." The wolf did not answer in words, because wolves did not speak. But it sent her a feeling, a sense of calm certainty that seemed to say she did not need to know everything right. Now. She just needed to take 1 step at a time, 1 breath at a time, and trust that the path would reveal itself as she walked it. Nora closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the panic, tried to find some kind of center in the chaos that her life had become. She thought about Dominic's hand holding hers, about the way he had looked at her, as if she was something precious. She thought about his declaration that she was strong and worthy, and exactly what he needed. She thought about the impossible fact that a king had chosen her, had claimed her, had upended centuries of tradition for her. And slowly, gradually, something inside her began to settle. Not acceptance, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of possibility. Perhaps the first tentative hope that this might actually be real, that it might actually last, that she might actually deserve it. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and Nora scrambled to her feet, quickly wiping away the tears that had escaped without her noticing. "Come in," she called, trying to sound more composed than she felt. A young woman entered, someone Nora recognized from the servants' quarters, though she did not know her name. The woman carried a tray laden with food, and she set it down on a nearby table before offering a deep curtsy. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but Steward Marcus thought you might be hungry. He said to tell you that the king specifically requested his personal chef prepare something nourishing for you." "Thank you," Nora said, and was surprised by how natural it felt to be on the receiving end of such service. "What is your name?" The young woman looked startled to be asked. "Lily, my lady. I have been assigned as your personal maid, if that pleases you." "It pleases me very much. Thank you, Lily." Nora approached the tray and discovered an array of dishes that made her mouth water despite her roiling emotions. Roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, delicate pastries. More food than she would normally eat in a week, all beautifully presented. She picked up a piece of bread and bit into it, and the taste exploded across her tongue with an intensity she had never experienced before. Enhanced wolf senses, she realized. Everything was going to be more vivid now, more intense. She would have to learn to control it, to filter out the overwhelming input before it drove her mad. "Lily," she said slowly, an idea forming. "I need you to tell me everything you know about what happens when a wolf emerges for the first time. Everything. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Lily's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded, and began to speak, her voice soft but clear. "Well, my lady, I am not an expert, but my younger brother went through his first shift when he was 13. The healers said it is different for everyone, but there are some common experiences. Your senses will be heightened, as you have probably already noticed. You might find yourself able to smell emotions, to hear heartbeats, to see in darkness. Your body will feel strange, like it does not quite fit right anymore, because your wolf is trying to establish its presence. You might experience mood swings, sudden surges of emotion that seem to come from nowhere. And at some point, usually within a few days to a few weeks, your wolf will want to shift for the first time." "Shift?" Nora repeated, the word feeling foreign in her mouth. "As in, actually transform into a wolf?" "Yes, my lady. It can be frightening the first time, but it is also supposed to be incredibly freeing. Your wolf has been locked away for so long that when it finally gets to run, to truly exist in physical form, it will be like nothing you have ever experienced." Lily paused, then added hesitantly, "The healers also say that the emergence is often triggered by significant emotional events. A threat to your life, a powerful connection with another wolf, extreme stress or trauma. It sounds like you experienced something quite powerful today." That was an understatement. Nora had gone from invisible slave to claimed mate of the king in the space of an hour. If that was not significant enough to wake a sleeping wolf, she could not imagine what would be. She ate in silence for a few minutes, trying to process everything while Lily bustled around the room, turning down the bed, lighting candles, preparing the space for evening even though it was still afternoon. The normalcy of these small domestic tasks was oddly comforting, a reminder that even in the midst of incredible change, some things remained constant. "Lily," Nora said eventually, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, my lady. Do you think this is real? Do you think a king and a king and a former slave, could actually work as mates? Or is this just going to end in disaster?" Lily stopped what she was doing and turned to face Nora directly, her expression serious. "I think, my lady, that the mate bond is the most powerful force in our world. I have seen it bring together wolves from enemy packs, wolves who should have killed each other on sight. I have seen it bridge gaps of age, status, personality, everything. If the bond is real, if his wolf truly recognizes yours, then nothing else matters. Not politics, not tradition, not what anyone else thinks. The bond will find a way." "But how do I know if it is real?" Nora asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since the moment Dominic first touched her. "How do I know this is not just, I do not know, gratitude or fascination or some kind of mistake?" "Has your wolf claimed him?" Lily asked simply. Nora thought about that, reaching inside herself to where the presence dwelled. And the moment she thought of Dominic, the moment she remembered his scent and his touch and the way he had looked at her, her wolf surged forward with such fierce possessiveness that it took her breath away. "Mine," it seemed to say, though not in words. "Mine, mine, mine." "Yes," Nora whispered. "My wolf has claimed him." "Then it is real, my lady. Your wolf knows. That is all you need to trust." The word settled something in Nora's chest, eased a tension she had not fully acknowledged. She finished eating, then allowed Lily to show her to the bathing chamber, where the young maid drew a hot bath, scented with oils that made the room smell like a garden. Nora had never had a hot bath before, had never experienced the luxury of simply soaking in clean water without having to rush through washing so the next servant could use the facilities. She sank into the marble tub and let the heat seep into her muscles, let herself float in the strange new reality of her life. She must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes again, the water had cooled, and the light coming through the windows had changed to the golden amber of late afternoon. Lily was waiting patiently with towels, and she helped Nora from the tub and into a soft robe that felt like wearing a cloud. "The king sent word, my lady," Lily said, as she combed through Nora's damp hair with gentle strokes. "He will be occupied with council matters well into the night, but he asks that you rest and that he will come to see you in the morning. He also said to tell you that there are guards posted outside your door, not to restrict you but to protect you, and that you are free to go anywhere in the palace you wish." Nora nodded, feeling both relief and disappointment at the message. Relief because she desperately needed time to process everything, without his overwhelming presence affecting her judgment. Disappointment because some part of her, the part connected to her newly awakened wolf, wanted him near, wanted to be in the same room where she could see him and touch him and confirm that he was real. "There is one more thing," Lily said, her tone becoming more cautious. "Lady Celestine has requested an audience with you. She is waiting in the sitting room and says she will not leave until you agree to speak with her." Every instinct Nora had developed over 15 years of servitude screamed at her to refuse, to avoid confrontation, to hide. But she was not a servant anymore. She was the king's mate, the future queen. And that meant she could not afford to appear weak or frightened. "Tell her I will see her in 10 minutes, Nora said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "And Lily, stay close. I might need you." "Of course, my lady." Nora dressed in the simple gown that Lily had laid out. Nothing fancy but clean and well-made, a significant improvement over the rough servant's dress she had worn that morning. She studied herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Same plain features, same unremarkable brown hair, same ordinary build. But something in her eyes had changed. There was a light there now, a strength that had not existed before. She walked to the sitting room with her head high and found Celestine standing by the windows, her back rigid with tension. The noble woman turned as Nora entered, and the look on her face was complex. A mixture of anger, calculation, and something that might have been desperation. "Lady Moreau," Nora said, keeping her tone neutral. "I am told you wished to speak with me." Celestine's jaw tightened, but she managed a stiff nod. "I did. Thank you for agreeing to see me after everything that happened earlier." She took a breath, clearly struggling with what she wanted to say. "I came to apologize for my behavior in the throne room. It was inappropriate and disrespectful, and I allowed my shock and disappointment to override my better judgment." The apology sounded rehearsed, but Nora sensed genuine emotion beneath the formal words. This woman had spent her entire life preparing to be queen, had been told since birth that her destiny was to stand beside the king. Having that future ripped away in a single moment must have been devastating, even if Nora had no sympathy for the methods Celestine had used to try to claim it. "I accept your apology," Nora said carefully. "I understand that today's events were unexpected for everyone." "Unexpected?" Celestine repeated, with a bitter laugh. "That is one way to put it. But I did not come here just to apologize. I came to warn you." The shift in tone made Nora's newly sensitive instincts flare with alertness. "Warn me about what?" "About the reality of what you have gotten yourself into. You may have the king's favor now. You may have his protection. But that will not be enough to shield you from the political forces at work in this court. There are families who have invested generations of effort into maintaining their power and influence. There are alliances built on carefully arranged marriages, on strategic bloodlines, on promises made decades ago. You represent a threat to all of that, and they will not simply accept your presence without a fight." Celestine moved closer, her ice blue eyes intent and serious. "I am telling you this not to frighten you, but to prepare you. If you truly intend to be queen, if you truly plan to stand beside Dominic and support his reforms, you need to understand what you are up against. These people will smile to your face while plotting your downfall. They will spread rumors designed to undermine your credibility. They will test you at every opportunity, looking for weaknesses they can exploit. And if they find an opening, they will destroy you without hesitation. Nora wanted to dismiss the warning as sour grapes from a rejected rival, but the intensity in Celestine's expression suggested this was more than just bitter ranting. Why are you telling me this? What do you gain from helping me? Maybe I am not helping you, Celestine said with a slight shrug. Maybe I am just enjoying the thought of watching you struggle with challenges you are completely unprepared for. Or maybe I actually have some principles beneath my ambition, and the idea of seeing someone torn apart by court politics simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time does not sit well with me. Take your pick. She turned back toward the window, her shoulders sagging slightly. For what it is worth, I do believe the king is sincere in his attachment to you. I saw the way he looked at you, the way his wolf responded to your presence. That was not political calculation or momentary fascination. That was real. But love and politics make poor bedfellows, Nora. And you are going to have to learn to navigate both if you want to survive. Then help me, Nora said impulsively. If you truly want to do something principled, if you really believe I am unprepared, then teach me what I need to know. I am not foolish enough to think I can do this alone. Celestine spun around, genuine surprise crossing her features. You want me to help you? After everything that happened today? After I tried to humiliate you in front of the entire court? You tried, Nora agreed. But you also apologized, which suggests you are capable of recognizing when you have made a mistake. And you are right that I am unprepared. I know nothing about court politics or diplomatic protocols, or alliance management. I do not know how to be a queen, but you do. You have been trained for this your entire life. If you are willing to share even a fraction of that knowledge, I would be grateful. For a long moment, Celestine just stared at her, clearly trying to determine if this was some kind of trick or trap. Then, slowly, she began to laugh. Not the bitter, mocking laugh from before, but something that sounded almost genuine. You are either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and I honestly cannot tell which. Do you have any idea how many people would kill for the opportunity to have exclusive access to the future queen, to shape how she thinks and what she believes? I do now, Nora said dryly. Which is why I am hoping you will help me develop better instincts for identifying when someone is trying to manipulate me, starting with whether or not you are trying to manipulate me right now. That startled another laugh from Celestine, and some of the rigid tension left her posture. I suppose that is fair. Very well, Nora. Former slave and current catastrophe waiting to happen. I will make you a deal. I will teach you what you need to know to survive as queen. I will help you understand the political landscape, identify your allies and enemies, navigate the social requirements of your position. In exchange, you will listen to my advice, even when you do not want to hear it. And you will remember, when you have power and influence of your own, that I helped you when I had every reason not to. That seems like a reasonable arrangement, Nora said. When do we start? We already have, Celestine replied with a slight smile. Lesson 1. Never accept help from someone without understanding their motivations and securing clear terms. You just did both, which suggests you have better instincts than I expected. Lesson 2. Appearances matter more than you want them to. Right now, you look like a servant playing dress-up in borrowed clothing. Tomorrow, we fix that. I will send my personal dressmaker and stylist to attend to you. You will need an entire wardrobe appropriate for a queen, and you will need it immediately. Nora bristled slightly at the criticism, but she forced herself to consider the practical reality. Celestine was right. She did look out of place, and in a world where perception shaped reality, that was a vulnerability she could not afford. Thank you, she said, meaning it. I appreciate your honesty, even when it stings. Get used to it, Celestine said. Honest counsel is going to be rare in your new life. Most people will tell you what they think you want to hear, or what serves their own interests. I am offering you something more valuable than flattery. I am offering you the truth, however uncomfortable it might be. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The king's reforms, his determination to abolish slavery and restructure the council and overturn tradition. It is noble and idealistic and probably necessary, but it is also going to make him enemies, powerful enemies, who will see him as a threat to their way of life. You need to be prepared for the possibility that they might come after you as a way to get to him. Your safety is not guaranteed just because you wear his claim. The warning sent a chill down Nora's spine, but she refused to let fear show on her face. I understand. Thank you for the warning. After Celestine left, Nora stood alone in the sitting room, as twilight deepened into night outside the windows. She should have felt triumphant, should have been celebrating the impossible reversal of fortune that had transformed her from nothing into everything in a single day. But, instead, she felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders like a physical burden. Celestine was right about one thing. Love and politics made poor bedfellows, and Nora was about to be caught in the middle of both. She returned to the bedroom and found Lily had laid out sleeping clothes and turned down the bed. The young maid offered to stay and attend her through the night, but Nora sent her away, craving solitude to process everything that had happened. She climbed into the enormous bed, wrapped herself in blankets that smelled faintly of lavender, and closed her eyes. But sleep did not come easily. Her mind raced with thoughts of Dominic, of the impossible mate bond, of her awakening wolf, of political intrigues and dangerous enemies, and a future that seemed both wonderful and terrifying. And beneath it all, the constant hum of awareness, the sense that something inside her was changing, growing, becoming. Hours passed. The palace grew quiet around her. And then, just as she was finally beginning to drift off, she felt it. A pull, a summons, a need so intense that it made her sit bolt upright in bed with her heart racing. Her wolf wanted out, not in some distant theoretical future. Now. Right now. Panic flooded through her. She was not ready for this. She did not know how to shift, had never been taught the techniques that young wolves learn to control their transformations. What if she lost control? What if she hurt someone? What if she transformed and could not change back? But even as fear tried to paralyze her, her wolf pushed forward with undeniable force, and Nora felt her body beginning to change. Her bones started to shift and reshape, her muscles stretching and reforming. It hurt. Gods. It hurt in ways she had not imagined possible. Like every cell in her body was being torn apart and reconstructed. She bit down on a scream, not wanting to alert the guards outside her door, not wanting to bring people running before she understood what was happening. The transformation seemed to take forever, and no time at all. One moment she was Nora, human and fragile and frightened. The next moment she was something else, something powerful. She looked down at herself and saw fur where skin had been, paws where hands should be, silver-white fur that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight streaming through the windows. She was larger than she had expected, nearly the size of a small horse, with a presence that felt ancient and knowing. Her wolf. Finally, after 22 years of absence, her wolf had emerged, and it was magnificent. She moved to the window, drawn by the moonlight, and looked out over the palace grounds. Everything was so vivid, so clear. She could see individual leaves on trees hundreds of yards away, could smell the gardens below, could hear the night guards making their rounds. It was overwhelming and incredible, and she wanted to run, wanted to feel her muscles working, wanted to test this new body and see what it could do. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. But before she could figure out how to leave the room without alerting everyone to what had happened, she caught a scent that made her entire body go still. Dominic. He was close. getting closer, moving through the palace with purpose. And her wolf, her newly emerged, barely controlled wolf, wanted him with an intensity that overrode every rational thought. She heard his footsteps in the corridor outside, heard him speaking in low tones to the guards. Then the door opened, and he stepped into the room, still dressed in his formal attire from the council meeting, looking exhausted and stressed and absolutely beautiful to her enhanced senses. He froze when he saw her, his golden eyes going wide with shock and something that looked like wonder. "Nora." His voice was soft, careful, as if he were afraid of startling her. "Is that you?" She could not answer in words, could not explain what had happened. But she moved toward him, drawn by the mate bond that sang between them, by the recognition of her wolf to his. And when she was close enough, she pressed her massive furry head against his chest and felt him wrap his arms around her neck in a gesture of acceptance and protection. "You shifted," he murmured, and she could hear the smile in his voice, even though she could not see his face. "Your wolf finally emerged. She is beautiful, Nora. Absolutely. Beautiful." He held her for a long moment, then gently pulled back to look at her properly. "Do you know how to shift back? It is all right if you do not. We can summon healers who can help guide you through it. But if you can feel your human form, if you can remember what it feels like to have hands and skin instead of paws and fur, you should be able to reverse the transformation." Nora focused on that, on the memory of being human, of being herself. It was harder than she expected, like trying to remember a dream upon waking. But slowly, painfully, she felt her body beginning to change again. Bones reshaping, muscles reforming, fur receding. And then she was human once more, kneeling naked on the floor with Dominic's cloak wrapped hastily around her shoulders. She looked up at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He was looking at her the way someone might look at a miracle, with reverence and desire and possessive satisfaction all mixed together. "That was incredible," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the transformation. "It hurt, and it was terrifying, but it was also the most amazing thing I have ever experienced." "That is how it should feel the first time," Dominic said, kneeling down beside her. "The pain will lessen with practice, and eventually you will be able to shift as easily as breathing. But you did it, Nora. You shifted. Do you understand what that means? That I am not broken?" she asked, voicing the fear that had haunted her for so long. "That I am not defective or incomplete or less than other wolves?" "You were never any of those things," he said firmly. "But yes, this proves beyond any doubt that you are a full wolf, with all the rights and status that entails. No one can dismiss you as wolfless now. No one can claim you are unworthy of being queen." He reached out and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Your wolf is remarkable, Nora. I have never seen coloring like that. Silver white and luminous. It is rare, possibly unique. And the power I felt radiating from her, it was significant. Much more than a typical Omega, possibly even approaching alpha strength. I have questions about your lineage, about where you came from, and who your parents were. Because I do not think you are as common born as everyone believes." Nora's mind reeled at the suggestion. "I do not know anything about my parents. I was found as a child, alone and abandoned, and brought to the royal house to work. If I have any family, any history, it was lost a long time ago." "Then we will find it," Dominic said with conviction. "We will search the records, investigate your origins, uncover the truth. Because your wolf, the way she emerged, the power she carries, it all suggests there is more to your story than anyone realized." He stood and helped her to her feet, supporting her when her legs wobbled from the strain of 2 transformations in quick succession. "But that is a problem for tomorrow," Right now you need rest. Your body has been through an enormous amount of stress today, physically and emotionally. You should sleep. Will you stay?" The words came out before Nora could stop them, vulnerable and needy. "Just for a while. I do not want to be alone right now." Something soft and warm filled Dominic's eyes, and he nodded. "I will stay as long as you want me to. Come, let us get you into bed properly." He helped her to the massive bed, settled her among the blankets and pillows, then removed his boots and formal jacket before lying down beside her on top of the covers. Not presumptuous, not pushing for more than she was ready to give, just offering his presence and warmth. Nora curled into his side, resting her head on his chest, and felt his arm come around her shoulders in a protective embrace. His scent surrounded her, pine and smoke, and something uniquely him, and her wolf hummed with contentment. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For today, for all of it, for seeing me when no one else did, for believing I was worth fighting for. You do not need to thank me for recognizing what was always true," Dominic replied, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. "But you are welcome nonetheless. Sleep now, Nora. Tomorrow we begin the real work of building our future together. But tonight, just rest. Just be." And surrounded by his warmth, soothed by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Nora finally let herself relax. Finally, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this impossible thing could actually work. That she could actually be what he believed her to be. That she could actually deserve this. Sleep came gradually, pulling her down into dreams of running through moonlit forests, of silver fur and golden eyes, of a future that looked nothing like her past but everything like hope. When she woke, the sun was streaming through the windows, and Dominic was still there beside her, his arms still holding her safe. And for the first time in her life, Nora felt like she had finally come home. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity and learning that left Nora's head spinning. True to her word, Celestine arrived the morning after Nora's first shift with a small army of attendants in tow. The transformation they worked on her was both physical and educational. A crash course in everything a queen needed to know delivered with Celestine's characteristic bluntness. The dressmaker took measurements and tutted over Nora's figure, which was apparently too thin from years of inadequate nutrition. Within days, the first gowns arrived, beautiful creations in rich fabrics that made Nora feel like an imposter every time she put one on. But Celestine insisted that presentation was half the battle, that looking the part would help her feel the part, and gradually Nora began to understand the armor that fine clothing could provide. The stylist worked similar magic with her hair, transforming what had always been a dull, unmanageable mess into something sleek and elegant. They taught her how to carry herself, how to enter a room with confidence, how to use posture and expression to project authority even when she felt uncertain. And Celestine herself delivered lessons in court politics that were simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. She explained the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed interactions among the noble families, pointed out which individuals could be potential allies and which were likely enemies, taught Nora how to recognize manipulation and redirect conversations to her advantage. "Never let them see uncertainty," Celestine instructed during one particularly intense session. "Even if you have no idea what you are doing, even if you are terrified inside, your exterior must remain calm and confident. Weakness invites attack in this world. Strength, even feigned strength, commands respect." Nora absorbed it all like a sponge, her mind working overtime to process information and identify patterns. She had spent so many years observing the nobility from the shadows that she already understood more than Celestine expected, but having someone explain the underlying motivations and strategies made everything click into place with new clarity. And through it all, Dominic was there. Not constantly, because his duties as king kept him occupied with council meetings and military briefings and the endless work of actually implementing his reforms. But he made time for her every day, whether it was sharing a meal, or walking through the gardens, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence while he reviewed documents and she studied the etiquette manuals Celestine had assigned. Their relationship developed in layers, building foundation before moving to more intimate territory. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams, and everything in between. Nora learned about the war he had fought, about the things he had seen that had changed his perspective on society and justice. She learned about his childhood as a prince raised to inherit power, about the pressure and expectations that had shaped him. And she shared her own story, the painful reality of growing up as nothing in a world that valued everything by birth and status. She told him about the small kindnesses that had kept her going, the elderly cook who had secretly given her extra food, the guard who had taught her to read using old newspapers, the moments of beauty she had found in difficult circumstances. Dominic listened to all of it with an intensity that made her feel truly heard, truly seen, for perhaps the first time in her life. He asked questions that showed he understood not just the facts, but the emotional weight of what she had endured. And when she finally broke down and cried over memories she had buried for years, he held her and let her release pain that had been building for too long. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," he told her one night as they sat together on the balcony of her chambers, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "What you survived, what you endured, it would have broken most wolves. But you not only survived, you maintained your humanity, your kindness, your capacity for hope. That is extraordinary, Nora. That is what makes you perfect for this role." "I do not feel perfect," she admitted. "I feel like I am constantly on the verge of making some terrible mistake that will prove everyone right about me being unsuitable for this position." "Everyone feels that way," Dominic said with a slight smile. "I certainly do. The difference is that you acknowledge your limitations and work to address them, while most people just pretend they know what they are doing and hope no one notices the truth. Your self-awareness is a strength, not a weakness." Their physical relationship progressed more slowly than the mate bond seemed to demand. Dominic was careful not to push, aware that Nora's inexperience and traumatic past required patience and gentleness. They kissed, long, slow explorations that left her breathless and wanting more. They touched, learning the landscape of each other's bodies through layers of clothing. They slept in the same bed most nights, finding comfort in proximity and shared warmth. But they did not complete the mate bond, did not take that final step that would tie them together permanently. Nora appreciated his restraint, even as her wolf grew increasingly frustrated with the delay. She was not ready yet. Not fully, though she was getting closer every day. She needed to feel more secure in her own identity, more confident in her role as queen, before she could give herself completely to the bond. And Dominic seemed to understand that without needing explanation. Meanwhile, her wolf continued to emerge and develop in ways that fascinated the healers Dominic had assigned to monitor her. Progress. Her shifts became easier and more controlled, until she could transform in seconds, rather than minutes. Her wolf form grew stronger and faster, capable of incredible feats of speed and agility. And the power that Dominic had sensed during her first shift only became more apparent with time. She could influence other wolves through force of will, could project authority that made even high-ranking betas submit instinctively. The healers speculated endlessly about her lineage, convinced that she must carry royal blood from some powerful line. DNA tests were ordered, genealogical records searched, but no definitive answers emerged. Whoever her parents had been, they had covered their tracks thoroughly. Or perhaps they had died before anyone could record the connection. 1 month after Dominic's return, he called the full council together for a formal session in the Grand Chamber. Nora attended as well, seated in the smaller throne that had been placed beside his, wearing a gown of deep sapphire blue that Celestine had chosen specifically for this occasion. The nobles assembled before them represented every major family in the kingdom, and the tension in the room was palpable. Dominic had been implementing his reforms steadily since his return, but this meeting would formalize many of the changes and give the nobility a chance to voice their concerns officially. "Lords and ladies of the council," Dominic began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "We gather today to address the future of our kingdom and the changes necessary to ensure that future is bright. I have heard your concerns regarding my reforms, and I have considered them carefully. But my position remains unchanged. The old ways, the traditions that allowed suffering and injustice to flourish unchallenged, must be set aside in favor of something better." He stood, and the authority radiating from him was unmistakable. "Slavery in all its forms remains abolished. The former servants of this house have been offered paid positions or assistance in finding new opportunities elsewhere. Most have chosen to stay, which suggests they were not as unhappy with their work as they were with their treatment and compensation. The restructuring of the council to include representatives from all social levels will proceed as planned. Elections will be held in 3 months to select 5 new council members from outside the noble families." A rumble of discontent passed through the assembled nobles, but Dominic continued without acknowledging it. "The practice of mandatory arranged marriages is ended. Wolves may choose their own mates, though families are free to encourage matches they believe would be beneficial. And finally, the legal code is being revised to eliminate laws that create different standards of justice based on birth or rank. All wolves will be equal under the law." "Your Majesty?" Lord Vaughan stood, his elderly face grave. "With the utmost respect, these changes strike at the very foundation of our social order. The noble families have guided this kingdom for centuries, have provided stability and continuity through times of crisis. To dilute their influence and authority is to invite chaos and weakness. The noble families have also perpetuated injustice and inequality for centuries," Dominic replied, his tone hard. "They have prioritized their own power and comfort over the welfare of the kingdom as a whole. I saw the result of that during the war." Lord Vaughan: "I saw soldiers die because supply lines were controlled by nobles who cared more about profit than victory. I saw wolves suffer because the laws protected the powerful while leaving everyone else vulnerable. That ends now." Another noble stood, a younger man Nora recognized as Lord Blackwood. "And what of tradition, Your Majesty? What of the customs and rituals that define us as a people? You speak of equality, but our strength has always come from recognizing that wolves are not all equal. Some are born to lead, others to follow. Some carry powerful bloodlines, others do not. These are facts of nature, not social constructs to be discarded at will." Before Dominic could respond, Nora found herself standing, the words emerging before she could second-guess them. "Lord Blackwood raises an interesting point about nature and bloodlines. Tell me, my lord, what would you say if I told you that the most powerful wolf in this room, aside from the king himself, is someone you would have dismissed as worthless based solely on their birth circumstances?" The chamber went silent, and Nora felt every eye turned to her. She had not planned to speak, had intended to simply observe this first major council session. But something in Blackwood's smug certainty had triggered her anger, and her wolf had pushed her to act. "I would say, Your Majesty, that power reveals itself in obvious ways," Blackwood replied carefully. "The strong rise naturally to positions of authority, while the weak remain in subordinate roles. This has always been the way of our people." "Then you would be wrong," Nora said, and allowed her wolf to rise to the surface just enough that her eyes began to glow with inner light. The air in the chamber grew heavy with the pressure of her power, and she watched satisfaction as several of the nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I was raised as a slave in this very house. I was told my entire life that I was wolfless, powerless, worthless, and yet my wolf was there all along, stronger than most of yours, simply waiting for the right moment to emerge." How many other wolves have you dismissed and degraded based on false assumptions about their worth? How many potential allies and resources have you wasted because you could not see past your own prejudices? She let the power fade and sat back down, her heart racing but her expression calm. Beside her, Dominic radiated approval and pride, though he kept his own expression neutral for the sake of the council. The Queen makes an excellent point, he said after a moment. Power and worth are not solely determined by bloodline or birth circumstances. They can be hidden, undeveloped, suppressed by unjust social structures. My reforms are designed to allow all wolves to reach their full potential, to contribute to the kingdom according to their actual abilities, rather than their assigned social position. Those who truly belong in leadership will rise naturally under such a system. Those who hold power only because of inherited privilege may find themselves replaced by more capable individuals. That is not chaos, Lord Vaughan. That is meritocracy. The debate continued for several more hours, with various nobles presenting arguments for and against the reforms. But the tone had shifted after Nora's demonstration, and even the most resistant voices seemed to recognize that opposition was futile. The king had made his decision. The future queen clearly supported it, and the raw power they both commanded made resistance not just foolish, but potentially dangerous. When the session finally ended, Dominic caught Nora's hand as they left the chamber together. "That was well done," he said quietly. "You turned what could have been a prolonged argument into a decisive moment. Blackwood and his allies will think twice before challenging our authority again. I probably should have asked before using council session as an opportunity to make dramatic gestures," Nora admitted. "But he made me angry, and my wolf wanted to make a point. Your wolf was right to make that point, and you do not need my permission to speak your mind in council or anywhere else. You are queen, Nora. Your voice carries as much authority as mine." They walked through the palace corridors toward their private chambers, nodding to guards and servants who bowed as they passed. Nora was still getting used to the deference, to the way people stepped aside and lowered their eyes, respectfully, rather than treating her as invisible. It felt surreal, as if she were living someone else's life. When they reached their suite, Dominic dismissed the attendants and closed the door, leaving them alone for the first time since the council session began early that morning. He looked exhausted, and Nora realized that he had been carrying the weight of these reforms largely by himself, defending his vision against constant opposition and skepticism. "You need to rest," she said, moving to help him remove the formal robes he wore for official occasions. "You have been working yourself too hard, trying to accomplish too much too quickly." "I need to work hard," Dominic replied, but he allowed her to help him undress down to his shirt and trousers. "Every day I delay is another day that unjust systems continue to cause harm. Every moment I spend resting is a moment when someone somewhere suffers because I have not yet fixed what is broken. You cannot fix everything at once," Nora said gently, guiding him to sit on the edge of their bed. "And you cannot help anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. The kingdom needs you healthy and whole, not burned out and broken." She moved behind him and began to massage his shoulders, working at the knots of tension she could feel in his muscles. He groaned softly and let his head drop forward, surrendering to her touch. "How did you become so wise?" he asked after a moment. "A month ago, you were terrified of your own shadow, and now you are lecturing kings and demonstrating power in council sessions." "I had a good teacher," Nora said, thinking of Celestine's relentless instruction, "and a good example to follow. You showed me that it is possible to be strong and kind at the same time, to pursue necessary change without losing sight of compassion. I am just trying to live up to that standard." Dominic caught her hand and pulled her around to stand in front of him, looking up at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "You exceed that standard every day. You are extraordinary, Nora, and I am grateful beyond words that fate brought you to me." He stood, still holding her hand, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, The air between them seemed to thicken and charge with electricity, and Nora felt her wolf surge forward with sudden, fierce desire. The mate bond sang between them, demanding completion, demanding acknowledgement, demanding everything. "Dominic," she whispered, and heard the wanting in her own voice. I think I am ready. Ready for all of it. Ready for us." His eyes flared gold, his wolf rising to meet hers. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed. We can wait as long as you need." "I am certain," Nora said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I want this. I want you. I want to complete the bond and be yours in every way that matters." The kiss that followed was unlike any they had shared before, deeper and more intense, flavored with promise and intention. Dominic's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and Nora wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in sensation and feeling. What followed was tender and passionate in equal measure, a claiming that was mutual and chosen, and absolutely right. When it was over, when they lay tangled together in the aftermath with the mate bond fully formed and singing between them, Nora felt complete for the first time in her life. She belonged to him, and he belonged to her, and nothing would ever change that fundamental truth. "I love you," Dominic murmured against her hair, his arms tight around her. "I know I have not said it before, have not wanted to pressure you or make you feel obligated to return the sentiment. But I love you, Nora. You are everything I did not know I needed." "I love you too," Nora replied, and felt tears slide down her cheeks, happy tears for once. "I think I have loved you since the moment you looked at me in the throne room and saw me instead of just another servant. You gave me myself, Dominic. You showed me I was worth something. How could I not love you for that?" They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the bond that now connected them on every level. And when they finally slept, it was the deep, peaceful sleep of wolves who had found their home. The formal mating ceremony took place 2 weeks later, a grand affair that brought nobles from across the kingdom to witness. The king claimed his chosen queen. Nora wore white silk and silver embroidery, and a crown of moonflowers that Celestine had insisted was traditional for royal matings. She stood before the sacred altar with Dominic beside her, and when the high priest asked if she came to this bond freely and willingly, her voice rang out clear and strong. "I do." The celebration that followed lasted 3 days, a festival of food and music and joy that infected the entire capital. Nora danced until her feet ached, greeted what felt like thousands of well-wishers, and smiled until her face hurt. But through it all, she felt Dominic's presence through their bond, a constant reassuring warmth that reminded her she was not alone in this new life. On the 3rd night of celebrations, as fireworks lit the sky above the palace, Celestine found Nora standing on a balcony watching the display. The noblewoman had become something like a friend over the past weeks, though their relationship remained complicated by history and circumstance. "Quite a change from scrubbing floors, is it not?" Celestine asked, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "Quite a change," Nora agreed. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find this was all a dream." "It is real," Celestine assured her. "Improbable, unprecedented, possibly insane, but definitely real. You are queen now, Nora, and from what I have seen, you are going to be a good one." "I could not have done it without your help," Nora said, sincerely. "You did not have to teach me everything you knew, did not have to support me when you had every reason to resent my existence. Why did you do it?" Celestine was quiet for a moment, watching the fireworks paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Because I realized something while I was teaching you. The role I wanted, the position I had prepared for my entire life, it was never about actually being queen. It was about power and status and validation from others. But you approached it completely differently. You focused on how you could help people, how you could support Dominic's reforms, how you could use your position to make things better. And I realized that is what a real queen does. Not pursue power for its own sake, but wield it in service of something larger. She turned to look at Nora directly. You reminded me that leadership is supposed to be about responsibility, not privilege. So I helped you because you deserved help, and because watching you succeed has been more satisfying than achieving my own ambitions ever was. Strange, but true. Nora reached out and squeezed Celestine's hand. Thank you. For everything. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration continue below. Two women who should have been enemies but had somehow become allies instead. And Nora thought about how much had changed, how far she had come from that terrified slave girl holding a tray of crystal glasses. She thought about the journey still ahead, the challenges that would inevitably arise, the work that remained to be done. But she also thought about the mate bond connecting her to Dominic, about the wolf that had finally emerged and claimed its rightful place, about the future that seemed bright with possibility. The fireworks reached their crescendo, and the crowd below erupted in cheers. Nora smiled and turned to go find her mate, her king, her home. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?